"Don't make this weird tonight," she said, then pulled her ex aside for a private talk and told me to grab us a table. I grabbed one at home instead. I left the restaurant, packed my things, and moved out. When she got home 3 hours later, the apartment was empty. My note. Didn't make it weird, just made it final. You know that feeling when you realize you're not the main character in your own relationship? I'd been fighting that feeling for 5 years with Natalie. She had this way of making me feel like my need for respect was actually just insecurity. If I questioned her late-night texting, I was controlling. If I asked why she canceled our plans for her friends, I was needy. I spent 5 years walking on eggshells, trying to be the secure, understanding boyfriend she claimed she wanted. It all came to a head last Friday. It was supposed to be our 5-year anniversary celebration. I'd booked a private corner booth at Costello's, this impossible-to-get-into Italian place downtown. In my jacket pocket sat a 3-carat engagement ring I'd been planning to give her for 6 months. The velvet box felt heavier than it should have, weighted with all the conversations we'd had about the future, all the hints she'd dropped about wanting something permanent. She looked stunning in the black dress I'd bought her last Christmas, the one that made her eyes look darker, more mysterious. For the first 10 minutes, everything was perfect. She was laughing at my jokes, touching my hand across the table, talking about how proud she was of the promotion that had made this celebration possible. Then we got to the hostess stand, and everything changed. Natalie Coleman. I felt her entire body tense next to me. The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by something I couldn't immediately identify. I looked over and saw a guy walking out of the bar area, tall, athletic build, that effortless confidence that comes from spending your days in a gym rather than behind a desk. Stubble that looked intentional, a leather jacket thrown over a simple t-shirt. It was Bryce, her ex, the one she described as immature but magnetic, the one she'd cried over for weeks before we met, the one whose Instagram she still occasionally checked when she thought I wasn't looking. Her face didn't look like someone seeing an immature ex. She lit up. It was a brightness I hadn't seen directed at me in months, maybe longer, the kind of excitement that made her seem younger, more alive. "Bryce, oh my God." She breathed it out, stepping away from me without even realizing it. Her body language shifted entirely, shoulders back, chin lifted. He grinned that lazy, arrogant smirk of a guy who knows he still has hooks in someone, who's never really had to wonder if he was enough. "Look at you, still killing it in black." His eyes traveled over her slowly, appreciatively. He didn't even glance at me. I was invisible, a prop in their little reunion scene. I stepped forward, extending a hand, trying to assert some presence in what was supposed to be my evening, my celebration. "I'm Alec, Natalie's boyfriend." Bryce barely flicked his eyes toward me. He didn't take my hand. He just looked back at Natalie and laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both dismissive and knowing. "Boyfriend, right? Good for you, Nat. Safe choice." That was the moment. The disrespect was so loud it was deafening. I felt the heat rise in my neck, my jaw clench involuntarily. The engagement ring in my pocket suddenly felt like a joke, like something naive and foolish. I opened my mouth to say something, to tell him to back off, to tell her we were leaving. But Natalie cut me off before I could speak. She turned to me, her eyes hard and annoyed, like I was the one causing problems. She put a hand flat on my chest, not affectionately, but to hold me back, to control me. "Alec, stop," she hissed, her voice low but sharp. "Don't make this weird tonight." "Make this weird?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "He just disrespected me to my face." "He's joking. That's just his sense of humor. Don't be so sensitive," she snapped, then glanced back at Bryce like she was worried he'd be offended by my existence, by my reaction to being dismissed like a child. She lowered her voice, but her tone remained firm, controlling. "I haven't seen him in 3 years. I need to clear the air. It's important for closure." "Closure? We're celebrating our anniversary. This is supposed to be our night." "It'll take 5 minutes," she said, waving her hand dismissively. She wasn't asking permission. She wasn't even really explaining. She was telling me how this was going to go. She turned her back to me, angling her body toward Bryce, creating a wall between him and me. Over her shoulder, she tossed the grenade that would kill our relationship. "Just grab us a table. Order me a Pinot Grigio. I'll be there in a few minutes. Don't be weird about this. She grabbed Bryce's arm, actually grabbed it with a familiarity that cut through me like a blade, and guided him toward the patio doors. Let's go outside. It's too loud in here. I stood there, watching them walk away. The hostess was staring at me with barely concealed pity. The couple behind us had stopped their own conversation to watch the drama unfold. I was a grown man, a successful investment advisor, standing in a crowded restaurant being told to go sit in the corner like a scolded child, while my girlfriend went on what looked exactly like a date with her ex. The hostess cleared her throat delicately. "Sir, your table's ready. Shall I seat you?" I looked through the glass doors at the patio. I could see them clearly, silhouetted against the city lights. She was laughing, her hand touching his bicep. She looked alive, animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. She looked like she was exactly where she wanted to be, doing exactly what she wanted to do. And I realized with a clarity that felt like ice water hitting my veins. I wasn't her boyfriend. I was her placeholder. I was the safe harbor she parked in while she waited for the storm to pass. I was the steady income, the reliable presence, the guy who paid for dinner and never made her feel bad about her choices. But I wasn't the guy who made her light up like a Christmas tree. I looked at the hostess, this young woman who was probably wondering why I was just standing there like a statue. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I won't be needing the table." I turned around and walked out the front door. I didn't storm out. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't throw my napkin down or make any dramatic gestures. I walked to my car with the calm precision of a surgeon who just diagnosed a terminal illness. There was no point in getting emotional about facts. I checked the time as I unlocked my BMW, 7:15 p.m. If she was clearing the air with Bryce, and if the way she'd touched his arm was any indication, 5 minutes was a lie. They would have a drink, maybe 2. They would reminisce about their passionate, complicated relationship. She would lose track of time because she didn't respect mine, had never really respected mine. I estimated I had at least 2 hours, maybe 3, before she even thought to check her phone. I drove home in complete silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the engine and the new plan forming in my head with crystalline clarity. When I got to our apartment, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt efficient. I felt like a problem had finally revealed its solution. I walked in and went straight to the bedroom, switching on every light. I didn't have time to move furniture, and frankly, I didn't want most of it anyway. We'd bought the couch together, picked out the coffee table together, chosen the art together. All of it was tainted now, marked by compromise and her particular aesthetic preferences that I'd learned to accommodate. I wanted only what was mine. I wanted to execute a perfect erasure. I grabbed a box of heavy-duty black trash bags from under the kitchen sink. The sound of the plastic unrolling was oddly satisfying. Rip, open, fill. I cleared my side of the closet in 4 minutes flat. Suits, shirts, ties, the expensive wool coat I'd bought after my last promotion. I didn't fold anything. I swept the clothes off their hangers directly into the bags, letting the hangers clatter to the floor like bones. The sound echoed through the quiet apartment, marking the end of something that had been dying slowly for months. Bathroom next, my electric razor, my cologne, the prescription blood pressure medication I'd needed ever since the stress of this relationship had started affecting my health. I left the toothpaste we'd shared. I left the body wash that smelled like her favorite scent. I took only what kept me alive and healthy and recognizably myself. I moved to the living room, and this was the most satisfying part. I unplugged my PlayStation, my gaming chair, my laptop and monitor setup. These were the things that had annoyed her, the toys she'd constantly complained about when she wanted to rearrange the space. Then I went to the router. I paid the internet bill. The account was in my name, had been from the beginning because my credit was better. I unplugged the modem and the router and shoved them into my laptop bag. Petty maybe, but appropriate. She wanted to communicate with her ex, reminisce about old times. She could use her own data plan, the safe in the bedroom closet, passport, birth certificate, the watch my grandfather had left me, the emergency cash envelope I'd maintained, despite her constant suggestions that we should spend it on vacations. My hands moved with mechanical precision, checking off a mental list I hadn't realized I'd been making for months. I worked up a sweat despite the apartment's air conditioning. I was moving like a man possessed, like someone who'd finally found a purpose after years of drifting. By 8:30 p.m., my car was packed floor to ceiling. The back seat was a mountain of black plastic bags, my life compressed into something that could fit in a German sedan. I walked back into the apartment for the final check, and the sight stopped me cold. It didn't look like someone had moved out in any normal way. It looked like a rupture in reality. My side of the bathroom vanity was completely bare, white porcelain gleaming under the harsh lights. The closet was a gaping hole of empty space next to her colorful dresses, like someone had taken a bite out of the room. The entertainment center was a skeleton of dangling wires where my electronics used to live. I took the spare key off my ring, the metal cold against my fingers. I placed it on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker we'd bought together during our second year, back when I still believed in the future she'd promised. I looked around for a piece of paper, something appropriate for the occasion. I found a credit card offer from the mail, one of those pre-approved letters that arrived weekly. I flipped it over to the blank white back. I took a black Sharpie from the junk drawer. I wanted to write a paragraph. I wanted to scream at her in ink, to explain every moment of frustration and disrespect that had led to this point. I wanted to list every time she'd made me feel small, every occasion she'd prioritized someone else's feelings over mine. But then I remembered the restaurant, remembered her telling me, "Don't make this weird." She'd wanted me to be quiet, to be manageable, to not cause problems. Fine, I could be quiet. I wrote 5 words in block letters. Didn't make it weird, made it final. I left the note next to the key, propped against the coffee maker so she couldn't miss it. I walked to the front door, turned off all the lights I'd switched on, and locked the apartment for the last time. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a period at the end of a very long sentence. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the building where I'd spent 3 years of my life. The familiar streets looked different now, like I was seeing them through new eyes. Every traffic light, every turn, felt deliberate and final. At 8:47 p.m., my phone screen lit up in the cup holder. Incoming call, Natalie Coleman. I didn't decline it. I didn't answer it. I reached over and switched the phone to silent mode, watching the screen glow for 30 seconds before going dark. She was probably just now walking back to the hostess stand, asking about our table, being told that I'd left without explanation. She was probably annoyed, maybe embarrassed. She probably thought I was in the bathroom or sulking in the parking lot, like some teenager having a tantrum. She had no idea that she was currently dialing a ghost. I drove toward the highway, taking the exit that led away from downtown, away from Costello's, away from everything familiar. I had nowhere specific to go yet. Maybe a hotel, maybe my brother's place 3 towns over. But I had never felt more at home than I did in that car, driving away from a woman who'd told me to wait my turn while she figured out her feelings. My turn was over. I checked into a Holiday Inn about 20 minutes away, choosing it specifically because it was unremarkable. I didn't go to a luxury hotel. I wasn't celebrating. I was regrouping, taking inventory of my new reality. I paid cash, gave them a false name, and took the key card to room 237. I ordered a large pepperoni pizza from the hotel phone, cracked open a beer from the minibar, and sat on the bed, still wearing my anniversary dinner clothes. My phone was face down on the nightstand, vibrating against the wood every few minutes like an angry insect. I didn't need to be in the apartment to know exactly how the timeline was playing out. I could reconstruct the crime scene just by listening to the voicemails later, when I felt ready. For now, I ate pizza and watched the local news, feeling more peaceful than I had in months. Voicemail 1, 8:55 p.m. Alec, where are you? I'm back at the table, and the hostess said you left. This isn't funny. Bryce already had to go meet some friends, so the whole conversation was pointless anyway. Stop being dramatic and come pick me up. Her tone was annoyed, entitled. She thought I was sitting in the parking lot teaching her a lesson, that I'd come crawling back after she'd sufficiently scolded me. The fact that Bryce had already ditched her added a layer of irony that I found almost amusing. Voicemail 2, 9:15 p.m. Okay, seriously, pick up the phone. I'm standing outside Costello's and it's getting cold. I had to pay for an Uber home because you decided to throw a tantrum. This is so childish, Alec. Call me back right now. The tone had shifted to anger, mixed with genuine confusion. The reality was starting to bleed through her certainty that this was just another relationship hiccup that could be managed and smoothed over. Voicemail 3, 9:48 p.m. Alec, I'm home and something's wrong with the electricity. None of the lights are working right, and the Alexa isn't responding. The TV won't turn on. There was a long pause, and I could hear her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, moving from room to room. Alec, where is your PlayStation? Where is your computer? The router is gone. What's happening? You're starting to scare me. Call me right now. Her voice had changed completely. The entitlement was gone, replaced by something approaching panic. Voicemail, 9:52 p.m. Complete breakdown. Sobbing that sounded genuine for the first time in months. I found the note. What do you mean, made it final? You can't just leave like this. We live together. We have a lease. You took everything. You took the internet router. Are you insane? Please just come home. We can talk about this like adults. I'm sorry I was with Bryce so long, okay? I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything. He's nothing to me. You have to know that. Just come back and we'll figure this out. I listened to that last one while chewing a slice of pizza that had gone cold. I felt detached, curious, like I was watching a character in a movie realize the killer was already in the house. Except in this version, the killer was the consequences of her own choices, finally catching up to her. The desperation in her voice was real, but it wasn't about losing me. It was about losing the stability I represented, the financial safety net, the comfortable life we'd built together. She was realizing that her actions had consequences, that treating people like disposable conveniences eventually caught up with you. I turned the phone off completely and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls and 36 text messages. I scrolled through them while drinking coffee from the hotel's complimentary breakfast area. The progression was fascinating from a psychological standpoint. Anger to confusion, to panic, to bargaining, to rage, and back to panic. But the silence in that hotel room was the loudest, most peaceful thing I'd ever heard. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her approval. I wasn't wondering if I was enough, if I was doing the right thing, if I was being too sensitive or too demanding. I was just free. 3 days later, I found a furnished apartment closer to my office and signed a 6-month lease. It was smaller than our place, but entirely mine. No shared aesthetic, no compromises, no walking on eggshells or modulating my voice to avoid conflict. The financial reality hit Natalie within a week. I'd been paying 70% of our shared expenses, not because she'd asked me to, but because it had seemed natural when we moved in together. My salary as an investment advisor made it easy, and I'd wanted to take care of her. Without my contribution, the math simply didn't work. Her salary as a marketing coordinator barely covered. Her car payment and student loans, let alone the rent on a 2-bedroom apartment in the city center. She tried to stay in the apartment for 3 weeks, borrowing money from her parents, putting expenses on credit cards, hoping I'd change my mind and come back. I kept my distance, communicating only through email regarding the lease. I told the landlord I was vacating and wouldn't be responsible for future rent. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. She'd missed 2 payments, and the property management company wasn't interested in sob stories about boyfriend drama. She ended up having to break the lease, losing her security deposit and getting a black mark on her credit report that would follow her for years. Last I heard from mutual friends, she'd moved back in with her parents in the suburbs. The same parents she'd constantly complained were suffocating and controlling, the ones she'd sworn she'd never live with again after college. She was 30 years old, sleeping in her childhood twin bed, surrounded by boxes of clothes she had no closet space for. The placeholder was gone, and without the placeholder, the whole structure had collapsed. 4 months passed. My life settled into something I barely recognized. Peace. I found a permanent place, a downtown loft with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was smaller than what Natalie and I had shared, but every square foot was exactly what I wanted. No compromises on furniture, no discussions about color schemes, no arguments about where to put things. I was killing it at work. Free from the constant anxiety of managing someone else's emotions, I'd landed 2 major clients and was being considered for a partner track position. My sleep improved. My blood pressure went down. I looked better, felt better, moved through the world with a confidence I'd forgotten I possessed. I hadn't heard from Natalie since the angry emails about the lease. I assumed she'd faded into the background of suburban life, maybe working at her father's insurance office, maybe dating someone new who didn't know about her capacity for casual cruelty. I thought our story was finished. Then she ambushed me. It was a Tuesday morning around 8 o'clock. I was at the coffee shop near my office. the same one I visited every morning, waiting for my usual dark roast. I was checking emails on my phone, feeling good in a charcoal wool coat I'd bought with the money I was no longer spending on her credit card debt and shopping habits. Alec. The voice was familiar, but thin, lacking the confidence and sharpness it used to carry. I turned around slowly, already knowing what I'd see. Natalie was standing there, and she looked diminished. That was the only word that fit. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, and she looked tired in a way that went deeper than a bad night's sleep. It was the kind of tired that comes from living in your childhood bedroom and having your mother comment on every decision you make at age 30. "Natalie," I said, my voice neutral and professional, like I was greeting a former client whose contract I'd terminated. "Can we talk?" she asked, her eyes darting around the busy coffee shop. "Just for 5 minutes, please?" I checked my watch, the one my grandfather had left me, the one that had spent 4 months in my safe because I'd been afraid she might borrow it. "I have to get to work." "Alec, please," she whispered, and her voice cracked slightly. "I just need to see you. I need to explain." I looked at her carefully. I didn't feel the anger I'd expected. I didn't feel the love I'd once thought was essential to my survival. I felt a mild inconvenience, like someone had asked me to fill out an unnecessary form. "You can walk me to my building," I said. "You have 3 minutes." We stepped out onto the sidewalk. The morning air was crisp, fall moving toward winter. She struggled to keep up with my pace, her shorter legs working harder than they used to when we'd walk together. "I messed up," she blurted out as we walked. "I know I did. Bryce was nothing. He stopped responding to my texts 3 days after you left. He was just passing through town, bored, looking for an ego boost. I threw away everything real for absolutely nothing." "I know," I said, keeping my eyes forward on the sidewalk ahead. "I miss you," she said, reaching out to touch my arm. I sidestepped the contact smoothly, not breaking stride. Her hand fell back to her side. "I miss us. I miss our apartment, our life together. Living with my parents is a nightmare. They treat me like I'm 16 again. I miss talking to you about work, about everything. I miss having someone who actually understood me." I stopped walking then. We were half a block from my office building, and I could see other professionals heading to work, carrying coffee and briefcases, living their adult lives with purpose and dignity. "You don't miss me, Natalie," I said, turning to face her fully. My voice was calm and factual, like I was explaining market conditions to a client. "You miss the apartment that I paid for? You miss the financial security? You miss having someone to manage and control while you figured out what you really wanted?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair. You told me to grab a table while you flirted with another man on our anniversary. That isn't love. That's management." She started to cry, and for the first time, it didn't look like the strategic tears I'd seen so many times before. It was the raw realization that her old tactics were hitting a brick wall. "Can't we just start over?" she begged, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please, just coffee sometime. Just a chance to prove I can be different. I've learned from this. I know what I lost." I looked at her one final time. Really looked. I saw the regret, certainly, but I also saw the entitlement still lurking underneath. She still thought she could negotiate. My dignity still believed that the right combination of words and tears could reset the game board. I smiled, but it was a cold expression that didn't reach my eyes. "Start over?" I repeated softly. I leaned in slightly, delivering the final callback to the night that had changed everything. "Natalie, you were the one who told me not to make things weird. You wanted me to stay quiet, keep my mouth shut, and not make a scene. So, I'm doing exactly what you asked." I straightened up and adjusted my coat. "I'm not making anything weird," I said firmly. "I'm just making it final." I turned and walked toward the glass doors of my office building. I didn't look back. I didn't check to see if she was watching. I walked through the lobby, swiped my badge, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I let out a long breath and smiled. I had finally found my table, and it was exactly where I wanted it to be.